It is said that night does not simply arrive here. It descends like a veil, slow and deliberate, drawn gently across the eyes of the desert until even the horizon seems to soften, as if it, too, is learning to be quiet. On the Giza plateau, the last light thins into starlight. The day's warmth withdraws into stone, into sand, into the long bones of the earth. And there, half swallowed by dunes, rests the Sphinx. Not a statue, not merely a presence. A lion's body stretched in patient stillness. A human face turned toward the darkened edge of the world, as though listening for something that has not yet been spoken. Limestone made into watchfulness. Silence shaped into form. Beneath the silence, an opening question arrives as softly as breath on cold stone. Who placed this guardian here, and what did it vow to protect? We approach without hurry. In the night, haste feels like a betrayal. The wind combs through sand with a sound like distant fabric. Somewhere far below, the Nile rests in its unseen channel, and though we cannot see it clearly, we sense its old pulse, a faint echo of life in a landscape built of dust. The Sphinx does not greet us with certainty. It offers no inscription that answers cleanly. It offers a riddle made of stillness. In the version most often told, the Sphinx belongs to the age of kings, carved during Egypt's Old Kingdom, when the Fourth Dynasty raised the pyramids and set stone against time itself. Many historians connect the Sphinx to Pharaoh Khafre, whose pyramid stands nearby like a dark mountain under the stars. The idea is simple. A ruler shaping his likeness into a guardian, binding royal power to the horizon, turning authority into limestone, so it might outlast breath and blood. Yet the night does not love simple answers. When you stand before the Sphinx, you feel it. The way the monument sits between certainty and doubt, like a gate that refuses to open fully. Its body is vast, its presence heavy with age, but the face, calm and worn, seems to hold something back. Some believe it is indeed a king's face, softened by centuries of weathering. Others, leaning closer into the sacred fog of not knowing, sense something older moving behind the mask, an age folded beneath the obvious story, waiting in the dust like a hidden name. Whispers tell us that time here is layered, not stacked neatly, but overlapping, like thin sheets of sand laid down, lifted away, laid down again. For the Sphinx has not stood uninterrupted in the sunlight. It has slept under dunes. It has been buried, forgotten, and unearthed again, praised as eternal, yet repeatedly returned to darkness. This contradiction is tender, almost human. Even the most enduring guardians can be made to vanish. Where memory fades, the sand returns. We imagine the centuries like a slow tide, wind lifting grains, arranging them into spirals, pressing them gently against stone until the paws disappear. Then the chest, then the lion's shoulders. The Sphinx becomes an island of face and crown, floating in a sea of dust, watching, listening, waiting. And then another age arrives. Hands clear the drift. The guardian's body reemerges into light, not fully restored, not fully understood, but revealed again, as if the desert itself has decided it is time to remember. There are stories, too, of a dream, of a young prince who fell asleep in the shadow between the Sphinx's paws when the monument was still half buried. In that dream, the Sphinx spoke like a god. Clear the sand from my body, and I will grant you kingship. This tale, carved on a stone stela between the paws, is both history and myth braided together, an ancient ritual of legitimacy, a sacred bargain whispered into limestone. Perhaps it happened as written. Perhaps it was crafted later. A story offered like incense to make power feel holy. Either way, the dream remains, because the Sphinx invites dreams. It is built from the same substance as longing, stone and unanswered questions. Marked by the moon, the Sphinx's face looks less like a monument and more like an idea made solid, an emblem of Egypt's devotion to the eternal, and also a reminder that eternity is never clean. The surface is scarred. The edges are softened. The desert has taken its share. Yet still the Sphinx watches the horizon. It watches dawn arrive again and again, like a sacred procession. It watches the stars drift overhead, indifferent and beautiful. It watches the human world change, languages folding into new tongues, names rising and vanishing like smoke. And we, standing here in the quiet, begin to understand that the riddle is not meant to be solved quickly. It is meant to slow the mind. It is meant to teach a softer kind of knowing, the kind that does not grab, does not demand, does not shout. Beneath the silence, we let the questions remain suspended, like dust motes in moonlight. Who carved this guardian truly? Was it a king's likeness, a throne turned to limestone? Or something older, reshaped and reinterpreted as centuries passed? The Sphinx does not answer. It simply holds its posture, lion body steady, human face calm, like a gate that never closes, like a vow that never needs to be spoken aloud. And in the final quiet, as the wind smooths the sand and the starlight thins, we do not force a conclusion. Perhaps it was never meant to be found in words. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. So we leave the plateau as gently as we arrived, carrying not answers, but a quiet wonder and the feeling that the desert, even in its emptiness, has been breathing all along. Marked by the moon, the plateau grows quieter than a whispered prayer. The night is not empty here. It is full of distance, of starlight, of wind moving like a slow hand across sand. The pyramids hold their angles in the haze, and the desert seems to breathe in long, patient rhythms. And there, where memory fades into limestone, our attention drifts closer to the face. Not the whole monument at once, not the lion body stretched across the earth like a vow. Only the face, weathered, patient, worn by time's long fingertips. In the moon's pale wash, the features seem both intimate and unreachable, as if carved from memory rather than rock. The brow rises with a quiet authority that does not need to speak. The mouth rests in a calm that feels older than language. The cheeks, softened by centuries of wind and dust, carry the gentle erosion of countless nights. Beneath the silence, a question takes shape again, but in a more delicate form. Whose face is this truly? The story most often told arrives like a familiar scroll unrolled with steady hands. It speaks of a king's command, of an age when pharaohs bound their names to stone, and stone to eternity. In this telling, craftsmen gathered on the plateau as the sun rose, and limestone became the canvas of authority. The Sphinx, many believe, was shaped in the time of Khafre, the fourth dynasty ruler, whose pyramid stands nearby, watching the same horizon. It is said that such monuments were not merely art. They were ritual. They were political prayer made solid. Yet the face does not confess its maker so easily. The more we look, the more the details begin to loosen their certainty. The outline of the brow, the softened mouth, the calm hovering at the edge of expression. Each invites a second telling, and then a third. The face feels royal, yes, but also strangely withheld, as if it refuses to be pinned to a single name. Whispers tell us that the desert remembers in layers. To understand this, we let our mind wander backward, not with haste, but with reverence, into the imagined quarry where stone was cut like bread from the earth. We see limestone walls rising like pale cliffs, marked by straight seams and chisel scars. We feel the air thick with stone dust, drifting in slow spirals like incense. No shouting, no hurry, only the measured pulse of labor. Chisels ringing like small bells, then falling silent, then ringing again. In ancient Egypt, stone was not merely taken. It was persuaded. It was offered shape through ritual patience. The builders knew the plateau's limestone intimately, because the Sphinx was carved from the bedrock itself, shaped from the living body of the earth. And that is part of what makes it so haunting. It is not assembled from distant blocks alone. It is released from what was already there, as though a guardian had been sleeping inside the stone, waiting for a moment to wake. But even in this sacred craftsmanship, the mystery lingers. Who guided the hand that shaped this gaze toward the rising sun? Some whisper one royal name, confident as a stamped seal. Others hesitate, and their hesitation is not ignorance. It is the quiet awareness that history does not always fit neatly into a single chamber. For there is a contradiction written into the Sphinx's proportions, subtle but persistent. The head appears small against the vast lion body, as if the monument's parts belong to different tempos of time. The body stretches with immense patience, a lion anchored to earth. The face, by contrast, feels like a mask placed upon a longer story. Some propose simple explanations: erosion, reshaping, restoration, centuries of burial and exposure altering the outline, and human hands smoothing, repairing, changing what the wind began. The Sphinx has been tended and patched, uncovered and defended, sometimes with wisdom, sometimes with haste. Its surface bears the quiet scars of survival. And then there are those who hold another possibility, like forbidden knowledge wrapped in cloth. What if the body was older, and the face came later? Not a scandal shouted into daylight, only a whisper, a thought, a shadow moving behind the official story. Perhaps an earlier guardian stood here, carved in a time now veiled, and later generations adapted it, reclaiming its presence, recrowning it with a new identity. In ancient lands, reuse was not always theft. Sometimes it was reverence, taking what endured and binding it to a new order of the world. We do not claim this as certainty. The night does not ask us to. It asks only that we listen, because the chapter's mystery is gentle but persistent, a guardian whose identity shifts depending on who is looking. The kings may have seen their likeness. The priests may have seen a cosmic sentinel at the gate of dawn. Travelers may have seen a riddle made of stone. And the desert, patient, indifferent, has seen only time. In the final quiet, we rest in uncertainty like a warm cloak. The face remains calm. It does not harden into an answer. It does not soften into confession. It simply watches, unbothered by our doubt, while the wind draws its slow circles in the sand below. Perhaps the truest likeness is the one that refuses to be claimed. Perhaps a monument becomes sacred not when it is explained, but when it is allowed to remain partly veiled. And as the moonlight thins, as the plateau exhales into deeper night, we let the riddle stay where it belongs, on the face that will not confess, until sleep approaches like a quiet hand, and the world becomes gentle again. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. It is said that the desert does not merely surround the Sphinx. It touches it, night after night, with a slow, careful hand. And when we return to the plateau, we do not find a fixed statue waiting faithfully in the open air. We find a figure that disappears and reappears, an ancient breath rising from the dunes, then sinking back into them, as though the earth itself were practicing a ritual of concealment. Marked by the moon, the opening image arrives quiet and haunting, the paws covered to the wrist, the chest buried, only the head visible, an island of limestone in a pale sea of dust. This is how the Sphinx has often been found, half lost, half remembered, a guardian reduced to a face and a silence. Beneath the silence, the sand becomes the chapter's sacred object. Not merely grains, not merely drifting matter. A veil. It covers, yes, but also keeps. It mutes the sharpness of sunlight. It cushions stone against the slow violence of weather. It erases footprints and claims and arguments, smoothing the world back into quiet. And yet, in the same breath, it hides, pulling the monument back into darkness, returning a so-called eternal guardian to the private rooms of the earth. Where memory fades, the dunes return. We begin to feel the rhythm of it, burial and uncovering, like time breathing in and out across the plateau. A long inhale of sand, a long exhale of revelation. In certain ages, people arrived with devotion. They cleared the drift away, not quickly, but with reverent care, brush by brush, shovel by shovel, as if waking a sleeping god. We can almost see the lantern glow of those moments, warm light trembling against limestone, ropes laid carefully, grit lifted away from carved surfaces as gently as one might lift dust from an old scroll. And in other ages, no one came. The plateau lay open under wind and starlight, while the Sphinx slowly vanished again. First a pause, then the chest, then the shoulders, until only the head remained, and then even that began to sink behind the moving dunes. The monument did not collapse. It simply withdrew, absorbed into the desert's patient forgetting. There is a softness to this contradiction, and yet it deepens the more we sit with it. A monument said to be timeless, yet repeatedly returned to darkness. What does the sand know that we do not? Whispers tell us that sand is both merciful and indifferent. It does not choose sides. It does not prefer kings over beggars, or certainty over mystery. It moves as it must, guided by wind, shaped by seasons, drawn into spirals by invisible currents. And yet, in its ceaseless motion, it performs something that feels almost intentional. It veils what is too exposed. For the Sphinx, for all its fame, is fragile in its own way. Its body was carved from the plateau's bedrock, a limestone that can weather and flake under the long years. The desert's winds carry abrasive grains that scour the surface like a slow file. Salt, moisture, temperature. Time has many tools. Over centuries, parts of the Sphinx have worn, chipped, softened, repaired. The guardian bears scars not as wounds that weaken it, but as records of survival. Here, sand becomes strange salvation. It hides, and in hiding it shelters. So we follow the dunes as if following a tide. The plateau begins to feel oceanic, waves of dust rising, cresting, settling. The Sphinx a reef that emerges at low tide and disappears again when the sea returns. In this slow-moving seascape, the question changes. We no longer ask only who carved the Sphinx. We ask what the desert has done to it, what it has protected, what it has erased. Perhaps the sand has concealed more than stone. Perhaps it has hidden tenderness, the private vulnerability of a monument that cannot move away from harm. Perhaps it has buried a forgotten scar, an old repair line, a cracked seam, a patch of weakened limestone, areas too delicate to withstand open exposure. Or perhaps, as legends like to breathe in the dark, the dunes have sometimes covered things that were never meant to be seen at all. A sealed threshold, a shadowed hollow, a place beneath the pause that feels like a chamber even if it holds only silence. We do not force a door to appear. We do not demand a secret passage. We simply allow the possibility to hover, like dust motes in moonlight, because that is how the Sphinx speaks. Through suggestion, through absence, through the quiet pressure of what remains unknown. History here is not a straight line. It is a tide, an ebb of devotion, a flow of forgetting, a cycle of uncovering, where the Sphinx returns to view, becomes newly famous, newly studied, newly photographed, followed by another slow retreat, as wind and time pull the veil back over its body. And the most unsettling truth may be the gentlest one. Even when uncovered, the Sphinx is never fully revealed. Some part of it stays buried, if not in sand, then in story. Because every generation that clears the dunes also lays down its own layer of interpretation. Some see a royal likeness and close the matter. Some see older shadows behind the official tale and keep listening. Some come seeking certainty and leave with only deeper quiet. In the end, the sand remains faithful to its nature. It moves. It covers. It uncovers. It never explains. And as the night air cools, as the plateau becomes a chamber of stillness again, we let the veil stay where it wants to be. Perhaps it was never meant to be found all at once. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. So we step back gently, leaving the guardian to its breathing desert, half in light, half in drift, while sleep approaches like a soft dune settling, and the world grows quiet enough for mysteries to rest. It is said that the hour before dawn is a doorway. Not a loud doorway, no hinges, no thunder, only a thinning of the night's veil, a soft loosening of shadows, as if the world is exhaling after holding its breath. On the plateau, the air turns cool and delicate. The dunes settle, the stars grow faint, and the Sphinx, half clear of sand, waits in the hush like a guardian of thresholds. Beneath the silence, there's a place between its paws where the earth feels older, a shallow chamber of sand and stone, a cradle for stories. When the sand thins and the limestone emerges, a promise rises with it, an old vow spoken in a place where shadows gather under a lion's chin. The tale comes to us not like a proclamation, but like a dream remembered the moment you wake. Fragile, luminous, half covered in fog. The opening image is simple and haunting. A young prince asleep between the paws. Not a conquering figure. Not a crowned certainty. Only a body folded into the cool air of early morning, his breath mingling with the desert's breath, as though he has lain down inside the world's oldest question. In the dream, the Sphinx speaks. Not loudly. Not like thunder or command. It speaks the way a thought arrives from beyond the veil, sudden, intimate, impossible to prove. A voice made of silence and stone. It offers a bargain. Clear the sand. Restore the guardian's body to the sun. Wake what has been buried. And in return, a crown will come as quietly as dawn. Whispers tell us this prince was Thutmose, who would become Thutmose IV, a ruler of Egypt's 18th dynasty, centuries after the pyramids were raised. By his time, the Sphinx had already endured long ages of wind and forgetting. The dunes had climbed its sides, swallowing its chest, pressing against its paws. The guardian that seemed eternal had been returned, again, to darkness. And so the dream's request feels almost tender. Remember me. Unbury me. Let me breathe. In the daylight world, this dream was carved into stone. Between the paws stands what scholars call the dream stela, a slab erected by Thutmose IV, inscribed with hieroglyphs that tell the story. The prince, resting in the Sphinx's shade. The Sphinx, speaking as a god. The promise of kingship. The command to clear the sand. The stela is not only a record. It is a seal pressed into time, claiming that the stone itself remembers a voice. Marked by the moon, then washed by the first pale light. Those carved words become their own kind of mystery. Because even here, contradiction lingers like fog that will not lift. Was it a true visitation? A gift of the gods, perhaps of Horamake, Horus of the horizon? A name linked to the Sphinx in later periods? Or was it a crafted tale, an elegant thread woven around authority, meant to wrap a reign in holiness? We move through this chapter as if walking inside the dream itself, where myth and memory dissolve into one another. The boundary is thin. The desert is a mirror. The mind becomes a chamber for echoes. We imagine the prince waking, heart quiet, the sky paling. The Sphinx above him, still half buried, watching the horizon with the calm of something that does not need to hurry. Perhaps the prince felt small beneath that gaze. Perhaps he felt chosen. Perhaps he felt fear, not dramatic fear, but the tender fear of realizing that a life might be shaped by forces larger than one's own hands. And then, in the waking world, the rituals begin. Not only royal rituals, but practical ones. Sand lifted away, drift by drift. Stone revealed inch by inch. The work of clearing becomes a form of devotion. We see it in our mind like a candlelit ceremony. Brush marks in sand, rope grooves, small piles of dust moved aside with care. The Sphinx's body returning to light as slowly as a name returning to memory. This is where the story becomes quietly human, because ancient rulers often leaned on sacred stories the way travelers lean on a staff, not always to deceive, but to steady the soul. In a world where dynasties rose and fell like dunes, a dream could become a foundation. Not proof, but permission. Not a weapon, but a reassurance. It is said the dream made the kingship feel inevitable. And perhaps it did. Yet the stela remains a stone that claims to remember a voice, and stone, like history, does not speak without interpretation. The hieroglyphs are clear in their telling, but the silence around them is wider than the inscription. The Sphinx itself offers no confirmation. It does not nod. It does not deny. It simply keeps its gaze aligned with the coming sun. Where memory fades, we realize something gentle. Even a sacred narrative does not end uncertainty. It only changes its shape. The dream does not resolve. It drifts back into morning light, dissolving as the sun rises, leaving us with a question that feels like prayer, soft enough to carry into sleep. When stone speaks, is it the past talking, or our own longing for meaning, echoing in a chamber of limestone and dawn? Perhaps it was never meant to be proven. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And as the horizon brightens, the Sphinx remains, half oracle, half monument, holding the dream between its paws, while the day arrives quietly, like a crown placed on the head of the world without a sound. It is said that after a dream fades, the world leaves a small hollow behind, not an emptiness that frightens, only a space where the mind reaches out, still half asleep, still searching for the last echo of a voice. And so, from the dream's gentle hush, we lift our eyes to what remains when the vision has drifted away, to what is missing. The opening image is stark in its quietness, the Sphinx's face, composed and calm, marked by absence. Where the no should be, there is only broken stone and shadow, marked by the moon. That shadow looks deeper than it should, not because it hides a tunnel or a secret door, only because it interrupts the face the way a sudden silence interrupts a song. It changes the way the guardian breathes in our imagination. It makes us aware that the Sphinx, so often called eternal, has been touched by time in ways that cannot be undone. Beneath the silence, the missing piece becomes a doorway for stories. They arrive as murmurs, soft, contradictory, persistent, because humans do not like gaps. We are builders of bridges, even when the river is made of uncertainty. A missing nose is not merely damage. It is an invitation to explanation. And so, each age offers its own account, placing it gently into the hollow, like an offering. Some tell of careless violence, a moment when sacred stone was treated like ordinary rock, a hand that did not tremble with reverence, an act done without listening to the desert's long memory. Others speak of slower forces, of centuries, not seconds, wind bearing sand like a patient blade, salt and moisture rising and falling in limestone pores, heat and cold expanding the stone, then releasing it, again and again, until a surface weakens and gives way. A grief made not by one strike, but by the quiet insistence of weather. Whispers tell us that both kinds of damage exist in the world, and yet this chapter does not rush to accuse. It does not sharpen the night into a courtroom. Instead, it listens, because the way people explain ruin reveals as much about them as it does about the monument. When faced with an absence, we reach for a story that fits our hunger, a villain, a cause, a single clean moment. Or we reach for a slow explanation, something that feels more natural, more inevitable, easier to bear. In truth, the Sphinx has endured many hands, many centuries, many interventions, cleared from sand, repaired, patched, studied, sometimes mishandled, sometimes saved. The limestone itself carries the memory of that attention, and the missing nose sits at the center like a question that refuses to close. Where memory fades, we begin to sense the deeper symbol. The missing nose is history's fragile breath. It reminds us that even the most enduring guardians can be altered, wounded, reshaped by hands that come and go, by devotion and neglect, by curiosity and carelessness, by storms and restoration. The Sphinx was built to endure, but it was never built to stay untouched. And that is part of the riddle. Because we often imagine ancient monuments as fixed points, anchors in the sea of time. Yet the Sphinx is not a fixed point. It is a living relic, changing slowly, receiving the world's weather and the world's choices. Its wounds do not make it less sacred. They make it more honest. In the deep exploration, we drift through the murmured accounts that cling to the missing nose like dust on the tongue. Some say a religious zeal once rose like a harsh wind, striking images to silence them, as if stone could tempt the human heart into worship. Others say soldiers used the face as practice, turning the sacred into a target. Still others point to the simple truth of age, that fragile parts break first, and that what is most exposed is most likely to be taken. We do not resolve these voices. We let them remain what they are, echoes in a large chamber. The Sphinx stands at the center, offering no defense, no confession. It does not explain what happened to its face. It does not correct our stories. It simply remains. And in that stillness, something quiet happens within us. We begin to understand that the missing nose is not only an absence. It is a reminder of how little of the past arrives intact, how much is carried to us in fragments. How much is reconstructed by imagination, by scholarship, by longing? Beneath the silence, the Sphinx's gaze still meets the horizon. Even without its breath, it watches. It watches dawn return like a ritual. It watches the dunes shift in slow spirals. It watches the stars drift overhead, indifferent and faithful. In final reflection, we allow the absence to be what it is. A soft wound in stone. A place where time has spoken, not with words, but with removal. Perhaps it was never meant to be repaired in our minds. Perhaps it was never meant to be fully explained. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And as the night deepens again, cool, gentle, and wide, we let the hollow remain hollow, and we let the Sphinx remain watching, patient as moonlight, while sleep approaches like a quiet veil settling over the desert's endless breath. It is said that some riddles do not live in words. They live in surfaces. In the hour when the night is thinning, when the desert feels like a temple emptied after prayer, we return to the Sphinx with a quieter kind of attention, not to its grand outline, not to its famous face alone, but to the skin of the stone, to the places where time has touched it most intimately. Beneath the silence, the lion body stretches across the plateau like a long-held vow. And along that body, on the chest, the flanks, the shoulders, there are faint lines, not the sharp scratches of a sudden blow, not only the ordinary scouring of sand. These are softer, rounded traces, as if the limestone once learned the shape of something gentler than wind. The opening image is subtle, almost easy to miss. Moonlight sliding across smooth channels, shallow contours that look like they were not carved by hands, but coaxed by long repetition. Some believe these marks carry the memory of water. Not a flood in a single night, nothing dramatic. Only rain that returned again and again, patient as breath. Rain from a world older than the desert's current face. A time when the air held more moisture, when storms wandered across this plateau and left their quiet signatures on stone. Whispers tell us that the Sahara has not always been what it is now, that long before written dynasties placed their names upon temples and tombs, the land knew different moods, wetter seasons, greener stretches, softer skies. Even if we cannot picture it clearly, we can feel the possibility like a cool draft moving through a sealed chamber. And here the chapter's mystery begins to glow, calm, persistent, difficult to settle. The Sphinx is placed within a familiar royal story, yet certain whispers hint at a deeper age, an older shadow beneath the official telling. In the version most often taught, the Sphinx belongs to the Old Kingdom, carved from the plateau's bedrock in the era when pyramids rose like geometric prayers. Many connect it to Khafre, and to the Fourth Dynasty's immense hunger for permanence. This story has weight. It fits the landscape. It fits the nearby temples and causeways. It rests comfortably among what we can date, measure, and place. And yet, where memory fades, the stone itself seems to murmur another possibility. Could a guardian have stood here before the known dynasties named it? Not as a conspiracy shouted into daylight, only as a question spoken softly, as one might speak in a sacred hall. The plateau becomes a palimpsest, one era writing over the last, smoothing edges, reshaping meanings, leaving traces beneath the surface like older ink. Could the lion body have watched a greener horizon, when the earth smelled different after storms? Some dismiss the thought as dreaming. They say the lines can be explained by other forces, by wind-driven abrasion, by salt rising through stone, by the delicate swelling and shrinking of limestone under heat and cold, by repairs and restoration that change the texture of the surface. These explanations, too, have their own calm logic. They remind us that stone is complex, and that weather has many hands. Others hold the thought like sacred contraband, dangerous not because it is violent, but because it rearranges the timeline like a curtain pulled aside. Because if the Sphinx is older than the story that claims it, then history must become wider, deeper, less obedient to our neat compartments. In the deep exploration, we do not turn this into a battle. It is not a war of experts, not an argument under harsh lamps. It is a murmur at the edge of belief. We imagine the plateau as a living archive, layers of sand, layers of stone, layers of human meaning. The Sphinx has been buried and unburied, patched and studied, praised and questioned. It has been used as a symbol of kingship, as a sacred horizon god, as a tourist marvel, as a riddle time will not explain. Each age places its hand on the monument, and each age leaves a residue of devotion, of certainty, of doubt. And beneath all of that, the oldest shadow remains possible, not proven, not disproven, only present, marked by the moon. The Sphinx seems unbothered by our need to decide. Its face holds the same calm. Its gaze keeps meeting the horizon as if it has watched many versions of the world come and go. Dry eras and wet eras, loud eras and quiet eras. In the final reflection, we do not declare a verdict. We let the oldest shadow remain a shadow, suggestive, steady, and gentle. We allow it to be what ancient mysteries often are, not a door that opens, but a veil that moves slightly in the wind, letting us glimpse the depth behind it. Perhaps it was never meant to be pinned to a single date. Perhaps stone remembers more than we can translate. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And as the night settles again in our thoughts, soft, slow, and wide, we leave the Sphinx standing where it has always stood, as if to say, without speaking, time has more rooms than you have keys. Beneath the silence, the plateau feels like a book that has been closed for a very long time, not locked with iron, not guarded with shouting, only closed by the weight of years, by the slow settling of sand, by the way stone holds its breath when night comes. With the oldest shadow lingering in our thoughts, our curiosity turns downward, not toward the horizon this time, not toward the sky's patient constellations, down, toward the pause and the bedrock's sealed hush, down, where the Sphinx presses its weight into the earth, as if anchoring a secret. The opening image arrives as a thought that feels like a cool draft, a hidden chamber, a corridor of stone, a doorway that has forgotten its own handle. It is said that certain places collect legends the way dunes collect sand, grain by grain, season by season, until the base of the monument becomes not only a physical foundation, but a gathering place for whispered possibilities. Some speak of tunnels, hollow places beneath the plateau, sealed away in darkness where sacred things were placed beyond reach, records written on fragile materials, offerings meant to outlast names, the memory of a ruler too powerful for sunlight, the kind of knowledge that would change how the story is told if it were brought up in today. Others insist there's nothing but solid earth, no emptiness, no corridor, no chamber, only bedrock and the human hunger for hidden rooms. They say the true chamber is the story itself, closed to all who demand proof, opening only to those willing to sit in uncertainty. And the night, as always, refuses to rush. Whispers tell us that curiosity is not always about discovery. Sometimes it is about reverence. Sometimes it is about standing at a threshold and admitting that we do not own every door. We imagine the Sphinx in its long life, buried, uncovered, repaired, buried again, receiving every generation's questions like dust settling on stone. It has watched priests and kings, scholars and travelers, storms and restorations. It has been used as symbol and riddle, as national emblem and silent witness. And still the suspicion persists, that beneath the pause there is something private, something withheld. Where memory fades, the contradiction sharpens softly. A monument famous to the whole world, yet suspected to conceal something meant for no eyes at all. In the deep exploration, we follow the idea of a sealed place as a spiritual symbol, because every civilization keeps something hidden, not always treasure. Sometimes it is shame, the records of a failure, a famine, a fracture in divine order. Sometimes it is hope, prayers pressed into darkness, vows buried like seeds. Sometimes it is forbidden knowledge, not because it is evil, but because it is delicate, destabilizing, too easily misused. And sometimes it is the fragile truth that rulers are mortal, and that even sacred authority can crumble like limestone under wind. In ancient Egypt, secrecy had its own holiness. Names were protected because names were power. Certain rituals were performed behind veils, within sanctuaries, in chambers lit by torchlight that did not spill out into common air. What was hidden was not necessarily sinister. It was simply set apart. And so the Sphinx, guardian of the horizon, becomes also a guardian of the beneath, of unseen layers where history sleeps. We picture ourselves lowering our ear to the stone, not with instruments, not with harsh insistence, only with listening. We hear nothing but a dull hush, stone being stone, earth being earth. And yet, irrationally, something in the silence feels shaped, intentional, alive. Like the quiet inside a sealed tomb before it is opened. Like the pause before a prayer. Marked by the moon, the shadow between the pause deepens into something that resembles a mouth that will not speak. The darkness looks smooth, not because it hides an entrance, but because it is a perfect place for imagination to gather. A negative space where stories settle. It is said that if a chamber exists, it is guarded by patience, not by traps. And if it does not exist, then the idea of it still teaches the same lesson, that the past is not obligated to satisfy our hunger. We drift through the legends gently. A hall of records, some call it. An archive of a vanished age. A secret corridor, others whisper, where offerings were placed for the Sphinx itself. A sealed chamber beneath the plateau, where the oldest names were stored like embers in darkness. Then another voice, quieter, says, perhaps the chamber is only the human mind. Our need to believe there is always one more door, one more hidden room, one more answer waiting behind stone. In final reflection, we do not force the hinge. The chamber remains unopened. And somehow, in the night's meditative pacing, that feels like mercy. Not all doors are meant to turn. Some are meant to teach us how to wait. So we let the Sphinx keep its secret, whether the secret is a real hollow beneath the rock, or the deeper truth that mystery is part of a monument's purpose. We step back into the fog, leaving the shadow between the paws undisturbed. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And as sleep approaches like a soft veil settling over the mind, the sealed hush remains, calm, ancient, and quietly intact. Beneath the silence, the plateau has its own way of turning our attention. When we have listened long enough to the hush under stone, when the idea of sealed chambers has softened into patience, something gentle happens. The mind lifts, almost without being told. The neck tilts upward, as if the Sphinx itself is guiding us. From the unseen beneath, we raise our gaze toward the sky, and the opening image arrives cosmic and calm. The guardian facing east, where dawn returns like a ritual each day, and above it, constellations drift in patient patterns, starlight scattered like sacred dust. Marked by the moon, the Sphinx looks less like a creature and more like a compass. Not a modern instrument, not a tool with numbers and needles, something older. A silent orientation, a body carved to hold a direction. The lion is anchored to the earth, but the face feels tuned to the horizon, as if waiting for a recurring promise. It is said that the Sphinx watches the place where the sun is born. Each morning, light approaches in stages. First a paling of the dark, then a thin gold breath behind mist, then the slow arrival of warmth on stone. The Sphinx receives this without celebration, without haste, only with the steady patience of a monument made to outlast human schedules. And yet, above it, the sky keeps moving. Stars shift in their ancient order. Constellations travel their invisible roads. The night is never still, only quiet. And this chapter's mystery begins to glow like a distant lantern. Alignment, the sense that stone and sky were once in conversation, and that the Sphinx may be listening still. Whispers tell us that ancient Egypt lived inside a cosmos that felt intimate, close enough to speak to, close enough to be bargained with, close enough to be read like a scroll. The heavens were not merely decoration. They were instruction, calendar, myth, warning, comfort. The stars were stories, gods and beasts and boats drawn across the dark. And the sun was more than a lamp. It was a ruler of breath and harvest, an eye that opened and closed, a daily assurance that order had not abandoned the world. Even without naming every constellation, we can feel the ancient impulse to place meaning in the sky because the sky was the largest thing humans could see, to measure time not only with sand and water, but with light itself. Some believe the Sphinx's gaze was set with intention, tuned to a certain rising, a certain turning of light that marked seasons, power, and holy time. That the monument was part of a broader sacred geography on the plateau. Causeways aligned with solar paths, temples oriented towards celestial events, stone arranged in dialogue with the heavens. Others feel these correspondences are later dreams, human minds weaving patterns into the dark, because we cannot bear a sky that is indifferent, because we want the ancient world to have known a secret we have forgotten, because a monument as immense as the Sphinx makes us feel there must be a hidden reason, an encoded message, some celestial key. Yet even doubt here feels gentle, like a lullaby, for whether the alignment was deliberate or later imagined, the effect is the same. Wonder unfolding slowly, like a flower opening at midnight. In the deep exploration, we wander through the ancient imagination. We picture priests watching the horizon with measured breath. We picture temples where hymns rose with the sun. We picture the Nile's rhythm responding to seasons, and seasons responding to the sky. We picture the way the year turned like a wheel, harvest and flood and sowing, guided by signs above that felt sacred and dependable. And the Sphinx in this vision becomes a measuring instrument made of devotion, a way to place the human heart within a vast chamber of night, because that is what measuring truly is, beneath all mathematics, a desire to situate the self, to say, I am here, beneath something immense, and to feel that the immensity has a pattern. The contradiction returns in a softer shape. Is this meaning carved into the monument, or poured into it by those who needed a sign? Perhaps both are true. Perhaps the builders aligned stone with sky because they believed the heavens were alive. And perhaps later generations, standing in the same silence, added more meanings, layer by layer, because the human spirit keeps returning to the sky when it cannot bear the weight of earth alone. Where memory fades, the stars remain faithful to their drifting. They do not confirm our theories. They do not deny our prayers. They simply move, indifferent and beautiful, keeping their secrets without cruelty. In the final reflection, we do not solve the sky. We simply sit with it. We let the Sphinx hold the horizon, and we let the constellations pass overhead like slow, sacred witnesses. We feel the night as an oceanic chamber, and starlight as dust suspended in a vast breath. Perhaps it was never meant to be solved. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And as the stars dim gently into the coming dawn, the watcher remains, stone and silence, measuring time not with answers, but with presence, until sleep takes us the way morning takes the night, quietly, patiently, without forcing the world to explain itself. After the stars, we come back to earth, not abruptly, never abruptly, but as if a great hand lowers us gently from a high chamber of night into the smaller chamber of human breath. The sky remains above, quiet and vast, yet our attention returns to what is closer, the ground, the stone, the delicate ways people have tried to remain near the sacred. The opening image is intimate. Beneath the silence, a small offering sits near limestone, nothing grand, nothing loud. A shallow depression in sand, a token placed carefully, a flicker of oil lamp warmth trembling against the Sphinx's withered surface, not as a flame we see, but as light we feel, soft and amber like a whispered vow. In that gentle glow, the Sphinx, though immense, becomes a focus for devotion. The lion body and calm face do not move, but the human impulse moves around it like a slow tide, to approach, to name, to ask, to leave something behind. Marked by the moon, we imagine warm breath and cold air, a prayer spoken close to stone, not shouted, not performed for crowds, only offered quietly into the night. And then the chapter's mystery begins to unfold, not as a hidden chamber, but as a transformation. Names spoken softly through the ages, changing like moonlight on water. It is said that in later times the Sphinx was linked to the horizon itself, honored as a form of the sun's rising. Horus of the horizon, Horamake, an idea more than a statue, a sacred point where light returns. In that understanding, the Sphinx is not merely carved rock. It is the threshold of rebirth, a guardian of dawn, the face of the place where the sun steps into the world each day. But other eras heard the monument differently. Some approached it as an oracle without words, a presence that hears more than it answers, a silent witness whose power lies not in speaking, but in receiving. People have always brought their questions to places that do not reply, because the act of asking changes the asker. A question spoken into a great hush becomes a ritual. It becomes a kind of confession. Whispers tell us that devotion rarely stays the same shape. Over time, names change. Languages fold into new tongues. Dynasties pass. Faiths rise and fall. The same stone can be called sacred in one century, forgotten in the next, and then rediscovered, loved again for reasons the first worshippers would not recognize. Where memory fades, reverence becomes rumor. A monument becomes a story becomes a symbol becomes a postcard. And then, sometimes, something deeper returns, when a person stands before the Sphinx at night and feels, unexpectedly, that they are standing before a presence. The chapter's mystery is this shifting, this layering. How can one figure be both worshipped and misunderstood? How can it be loved and forgotten, then loved again differently? In the deep exploration, we sense the spiritual contradiction at the heart of enduring icons. They gather meanings the way stone gathers weathering. Each generation leaves a thin layer, sometimes tender, a careful offering, a prayer spoken with humility, the belief that the Sphinx listens. Sometimes careless, a simplified tale repeated until it becomes hard as sand. Sometimes contradictory, one era calling it a royal likeness, another calling it a god, another calling it a curiosity, another calling it a puzzle. And yet the Sphinx remains, untroubled by shifting titles, unmoved by the arguments of those who want a single name to rule them all. Because stone has its own patience, it does not need agreement to endure. We drift through imagined moments across centuries, softly, without insisting on exact dates, letting history feel like a procession of lanterns moving through fog. A priest in a later age, honoring the sunrise with hymns. A traveler pausing, placing a small token near the pause. A scholar reading inscriptions by low light. A caretaker clearing sand away with reverent hands. A passerby who says the monument's name incorrectly, but says it with awe. Each one speaks into the darkness, hoping something ancient hears. And in a strange way, something does. Not necessarily a god, not necessarily a voice, but the act itself, the human desire to be witnessed by something older than the self. To speak softly into the night and feel, for a moment, that the world is listening back. Marked by the moon, we realize the names are like incense. They rise, they curl, they vanish. In the final reflection, the titles fade into the night air, dissolving like smoke. What stays is not the correctness of a name, but the tenderness of naming. The Sphinx remains, weathered, calm, patient, receiving every whispered word without correction, holding the horizon in its steady gaze. Perhaps it was never meant to belong to a single language. Perhaps sacred things survive by changing shape. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And as sleep approaches like a soft veil settling over the mind, the last offered name fades, leaving only stone, mist, and the quiet comfort of having spoken into the dark. It is said that the desert remembers footsteps only briefly. A path appears in the sand, soft, shallow, newly made. Then the wind comes like a patient editor, smoothing the page back to blank. And so, from whispered prayers and close devotion, we move outward into another kind of approach. The footsteps are strangers. The opening image is dusk. A line of silhouettes crests the plateau, distant and indistinct, pausing as if they have reached the edge of a story. The sky is dusk blue, the air hazed with drifting dust, and the Sphinx emerges from sand like a dream half-remembered, face calm, body immense, the horizon held in its unblinking gaze. Beneath the silence, the visitors stop. They do not arrive empty-handed. They carry new mirrors, not mirrors of glass, but mirrors of mind, sketches, comparisons, myths folded into pockets, old stories from far chambers. They bring words that have served them before, lion, guardian, monster, oracle, relic, trying to place the Sphinx inside a familiar frame, trying to make the foreign legible. Marked by the moon, the Sphinx receives these mirrors without protest. It does not correct. It does not explain. It does not become smaller to fit anyone's vocabulary. And yet the act of naming begins anyway, because it is what humans do when faced with something older than their own lineage. We name it to soften the fear of not knowing. We name it to claim a foothold in the vastness. We name it to carry it home. In the deep exploration, we feel how the Sphinx becomes a screen for projection, a stone that receives foreign imaginations the way it receives moonlight, quietly, evenly, without preference. Some visitors romanticize it, turning it into a symbol of exotic distance. The monument becomes a backdrop for longing. The faraway East imagined as endless mystery, as timeless spectacle, as a place where one can escape the ordinary self. Others treat it like a puzzle to be conquered. They arrive with measuring eyes, with questions sharpened into tools, with the belief that every riddle exists only to be forced open. They look beneath the pause and into the shadows. They stare at the missing nose like a challenge. They imagine sealed chambers and insist the stone must yield. And still, there are those quiet souls among the travelers who simply fall silent before it. They expect a curiosity, perhaps even triumph. Instead, they find a reverent melancholy they did not predict. They stand before the Sphinx and feel, for a moment, the weight of time. How many lives have passed beneath these stars? How many empires have risen and faded like fog? Whispers tell us that such silence is its own kind of offering. Where memory fades, the contradiction grows gentle but persistent. The Sphinx is both universally famous and endlessly misread. The more eyes it attracts, the more interpretations multiply. Sketches become engravings. Engravings become books. Books become rumors carried across oceans. The Sphinx travels outward in copies, rendered, translated, simplified, romanticized, doubted, until the original silence is almost covered by fame. This, too, is a kind of forbidden knowledge. That fame does not clarify. It often obscures. Because with each new mirror held up to the Sphinx, the monument becomes a reflection of the viewer. It reveals what the visitor needs, a symbol of empire, a trophy of discovery, a proof of ancient wisdom, a beautiful ruin to mourn, a mystery to monetize, a legend to retell. The Sphinx, meanwhile, remains itself. It holds the horizon the way it always has. It endures the drift of sand and the drift of stories. It outlasts each wave of interpretation, because interpretation is made of breath, and breath is brief. In the final reflection, the visitors depart. Their footprints trail away from the pause, thin and temporary, already being softened by the wind. A scrap of paper lifts, tumbles, disappears. The plateau returns to its older emptiness, as if the desert is gently reclaiming the scene from human attention. The Sphinx is unchanged by praise or misunderstanding. It does not become more sacred because someone called it holy. It does not become less sacred because someone called it a monster. It simply remains, weathered, calm, unpossessable, teaching the slow lesson that true antiquity cannot be owned by any single gaze. Perhaps it was never meant to be translated perfectly. Perhaps it was never meant to be solved. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And as dusk turns toward night again, the last silhouettes fade, the wind smooths the sand, and the Sphinx holds the plateau in quiet guardianship, ancient, patient, and still listening, while sleep approaches like a veil drawn gently across the eyes. Beneath the silence, there's a kind of music that does not travel through air. It travels through surfaces. After so many eyes and stories, after the visitors and their mirrors have come and gone, we notice the Sphinx again in a different way. Not as a symbol first, not as a riddle first, but as a body, as a relic that has endured long enough to require care. The opening image is close and quiet. A seam, a patch of stone where new material meets old, a surface that does not match perfectly, yet holds together in patient compromise. The moonlight slides across it and reveals the difference in texture, in tone, in grain, like a stitch across skin, proof that something once split and was held back from ruin. marked by the moon. The Sphinx does not appear diminished by these seams. It appears more real. Restoration is revealed as its own chapter of mystery, because it asks a tender question, one that feels spiritual the longer we sit with it. When we repair the past, what do we preserve, and what do we accidentally rewrite? It is said that the Sphinx has suffered from the long exposure of open air, wind-driven sand, shifting moisture, salt crystals working quietly within pores, heat and cold expanding and contracting the limestone over centuries. There have been collapses, flaking layers, weakened blocks. There have been moments when parts of the body, paws, chest, shoulders, needed intervention, not to make the monument prettier, but to keep it from slipping further into loss. And so hands arrived. Not only the hands of ancient workers long ago, but the hands of later caretakers, generations who saw the guardian crumbling and felt the quiet responsibility of survival. We move through this chapter as if walking through a sacred workshop at night. No loud noises, no harsh light, only the imagined patience of careful labor. Crumbling edges shored up, weak stones supported, fragile surfaces stabilized. Mortar pressed gently into gaps. Replacement blocks fitted where original stone could no longer hold its own weight. Each intervention is an act of devotion, but also a kind of authorship, because to choose where to place a new stone is to choose what the Sphinx will become. To select a method is to select a future. To save a monument is to enter its story as a writer, quietly, perhaps unwillingly, adding a line that cannot be erased. Whispers tell us that this is the ache at the heart of preservation. The Sphinx becomes a living relic, its original self scattered across time like broken pottery, reassembled again and again by hands with different intentions. Some repairs are wise and gentle. They respect the shape. They protect without boasting. They allow the monument to remain itself, only steadied. Other repairs, made in haste or under the spell of certainty, leave their own marks. Materials that do not breathe like limestone. Edges that look too straight, too new. Patches that catch the light differently, announcing the presence of a later age. And yet even those imperfect interventions carry a human truth. To care is to risk. To protect is to touch. To touch is to change. Where memory fades, the emotional arc turns melancholy. We realize that survival leaves scars, and scars tell stories too. A scar is not merely damage. It is a record of the moment something almost failed, and did not. It is the place where vulnerability becomes visible. The place where the past admits it cannot endure alone. The contradiction deepens, gentle but undeniable. The desire to keep the Sphinx eternal requires accepting that it will never again be purely ancient. It will always be ancient and repaired, old and touched, sacred and humanly managed. The Sphinx, like every surviving relic, is not a sealed object frozen in time. It is a relationship across generations, a conversation between what was and what must be done to keep what was from disappearing. Beneath the silence, we sense a different kind of reverence forming. Not the reverence that demands perfection, not the reverence that imagines ancient things should remain untouched forever, but the reverence that understands continuity is made by imperfect hands. We look again at the seams, the tonal mismatches, the filled cracks that remain visible like stitched veins, the patched sections that form a subtle mosaic across the lion body. These are scar songs, quiet evidence of care across generations, proof that people returned not only to wonder, but to protect, proof that the Sphinx was not always left alone beneath the stars. Someone noticed its crumbling edges. Someone chose to intervene rather than watch it vanish. In the final reflection, we do not judge. We do not call the scars ugly, nor do we call them holy. We simply listen to what they tell us, that endurance has a cost, and that love for the past is expressed not only through admiration, but through maintenance. Perhaps it was never meant to remain untouched. Perhaps it was meant to remain, however it could. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And as the night air softens our thoughts, cool, wide, and gentle, the Sphinx resumes its long, patient silence. The seams remain, the patches hold, the wind drifts on, the guardian stays, ancient, repaired, and still watching the horizon as if time itself were only another visitor passing through. It is said that some endings do not close a door. They simply turn a lantern, so the same room looks different. We arrive at the chapter where all prior threads gather like wind-blown sand returning to a single hollow. The night has thinned. The air is cool and delicate, as if the plateau is holding its breath. And there, at the edge of dawn, the Sphinx waits. Its face is pale in the first light. Its shadow lies long across the sand. The horizon begins to glow as if lit from within. Beneath the silence, the riddle remains. Who made it? When exactly? And what, if anything, lies hidden beneath its watch? We have carried these questions, like quiet stones in the pocket of the mind. Now, at the threshold hour, we set them down gently and look at them again, without forcing them into a hard shape. We revisit the contradictions the way one walks around a quiet altar, slowly, respectfully, with space between each thought, so the mind can breathe. The royal story returns first, the familiar account of a monument born in the age of pyramids, carved from the bedrock as dynasties pressed their names into stone. A guardian aligned with kingship, with the sun's order, with a world that believed authority could be made eternal. Then the older shadow returns, soft and persistent, those faint lines and softened contours that some interpret as memories of water, of a different climate, of an older earth. Not proven, not dismissed, only present, like a veil that shifts slightly when the wind passes. The sacred dream returns, too, the young prince asleep between the paws. The dream stela claiming a voice rose from stone and offered a bargain. Clear the sand, restore the guardian, and the crown will come as quietly as dawn. Yet beside it sits another possibility, that the dream is also a crafted tale, a political hymn, a way to steady a reign by binding it to holiness. Exposed monument and secret chamber, another gentle tension. The Sphinx is visible to the whole world, photographed and studied, its silhouette known across oceans. And still, the thought gathers beneath it like shadow. A corridor, a sealed hush, a chamber that refuses to open. Perhaps nothing lies there but bedrock. Perhaps the true hidden room is the story itself, closed to anyone who demands proof as payment. Repaired body and timeless legend, one more layer. We remember the seams, the patches, the scar songs of restoration. The truth that survival leaves marks. The paradox that to keep the Sphinx eternal, we must accept that it will never again be purely ancient. It will always be ancient and repaired, old and touched, sacred and managed. And as we circle these threads, something quiet becomes clear. The deep exploration is not an argument. It is a practice. We notice how the Sphinx gathers uncertainty the way it gathers starlight, softly, without strain. It does not reject our questions. It does not satisfy them. It simply holds them, the way the horizon holds the sun before it rises. Where memory fades, we begin to understand the implied forbidden knowledge of this place, gentle, but profound. Human certainty is often the youngest thing in any ancient place. Certainty arrives late. It is eager. It wants straight lines and fixed labels. But the oldest truths do not always come in sentences. They arrive as fragments, chips of limestone, half-buried inscriptions, withered surfaces, whispered names changing through centuries. They arrive as echoes in a vast chamber, where some parts of a story have been carried away by wind, and other parts have been stitched back with care. Perhaps the Sphinx was never meant to be solved like a riddle in a book. Perhaps it is a gate made of stone and silence, inviting the mind to slow, inviting the heart to soften. Because the effect of the Sphinx, night after night, dawn after dawn, is not to deliver answers, but to change the pace of the listener, to draw the breath longer, to make the world feel older and wider and less rushed. Marked by the moon, and now touched by the first light, the Sphinx keeps watching. The stars fade gently overhead, not defeated, only yielding their place to morning. The sand lies in spirals, as if time itself has been stirred and then allowed to settle. The plateau feels like a temple empty to voices. In the final reflection, we do not solve the Sphinx. We let it remain what it has always been, A guardian that disappears and reappears beneath veils of sand. A face that will not confess. A dream that may be holy and may be crafted. A suspected chamber that may be empty and still meaningful. A body stitched by care into endurance. Perhaps it was never meant to be found in full. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. As the sun lifts, quietly, without ceremony, the guardian keeps watching, and we leave with sacred uncertainty, calm as breath, carried softly into sleep, as if the unanswered riddle has turned once more, and in turning, has taught us how to rest. It is said that the desert has an old way of ending stories, not with a closing line, not with an answer, but with wind. The last light of our chapter journey fades, and the plateau returns to its oldest rhythm, night, drifting dust, and the long patience of stone. The opening image is simple. The Sphinx alone again, the world's questions loosening their grip and drifting away like sand settling after footsteps. Beneath the silence, the air feels wider. The visitor paths are gone. The imagined lanterns we carried through each chapter, dream, sand, stars, scars, whispered names, hidden chambers, flicker once more in memory, and then, gently, are extinguished. We are left with the watcher. Moonlight arrives without urgency, laying a thin silver veil along the lion's back. The face is calm, unconfessing. The broken shadow where the nose once was does not look like damage now. In this softer light, it looks like a quiet reminder that even sacred things are allowed to change. Marked by the moon, the Sphinx appears less like a monument and more like a presence. It does not perform. It does not prove. It simply remains, as it has remained through storm and silence, through burial and uncovering, through praise and misunderstanding. And the mystery has not been solved. In this closing, that becomes a comfort rather than a lack. Because there's a moment, usually when a mind is tired, and the night has begun to feel like a sanctuary, when we understand something tender, that a mystery can be a companion, that not knowing can be sacred, that silence is not emptiness, but depth. Whispers tell us this is why we are drawn to riddles that do not yield, not because we hunger for frustration, but because the unraveled thread mirrors something inside us. We each carry chambers we cannot fully open. We each hold memories half buried, hopes we cannot completely explain, fears that soften only when we stop trying to name them too sharply. The Sphinx stands as a calm companion to that uncertainty. It does not demand that we resolve ourselves. It does not demand that we build a perfect timeline, a single verdict, a clean sentence that ties everything shut. Instead, it offers the ancient permission to be unfinished. We linger slowly on the soundless space between the pause. The shadow there is deep and calm, a shape that invites imagination, sealed or empty, secret or ordinary bedrock. It no longer matters in the way it once did. The chamber that refuses to open becomes a symbol rather than a target, a reminder that some doors exist to teach waiting, not entry. Where memory fades, we notice the repaired seams along the body again, the scar songs softened by night. In daylight, the patches can look like questions. In moonlight, they look like tenderness. Proof that people tried to keep something alive. Proof that survival is not purity, it is continuity. Ancient yet touched. Known yet unknowable. Present, yet belonging to a time beyond our grasp. The contradiction that once felt sharp now feels like a lullaby. We let our attention drift to the horizon, where darkness and dawn trade places, without conflict. Somewhere far beyond the plateau, morning is being prepared, quietly, as it always is. But here the night still holds. The Sphinx faces east, unblinking. It watches as if watching is not effort, but nature. It is said that the oldest guardians do not guard treasure. They guard pacing. They slow the heartbeat. They lengthen the breath. They remind the mind that it is not required to conquer every shadow to be safe. And so, in this gentle closing, we release the riddle back to where it belongs. We do not carry it away like a trophy. We do not force it into a final explanation. We leave it with the Sphinx, under moonlight, under drifting fog, under the quiet movement of sand like oceanic tide. We step away slowly, not turning it into a farewell, but into a soft withdrawal, like a candle being lowered, like a voice choosing silence. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And as sleep approaches, soft as starlight, steady as breath, the watcher returns fully to the dark. The plateau empties. The wind smooths the sand. The last question settles gently, like dust, into stillness. And the Sphinx remains calm, ancient, listening, while we drift, unburdened, into the quiet mercy of night.